Good afternoon, Ann.
Good afternoon, Jim.
Thanks so much for agreeing to sit down for this conversation. Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Ann Macdonald. I've been the technology integrator and now computer science teacher in Falmouth for 10, 12 years. And before that, I was an 8th grade science teacher. And before that, I was a math and science teacher.
Right.
Teaching at middle school.
We're here to talk about the original MLTI, the arrival of the MLTI. So I'd like to begin. Do you remember when you first heard, were you listening and aware of the pending arrival of the MLTI?
I was, because when I started in Falmouth, and that really was the first time I'd heard about it, because before that I was in a private school, hadn't heard a word, didn't know anything about it. Got to Falmouth, and the 7th grade students got it, I think, the year after I got here. And I was extremely jealous. I was so jealous. In my prior job, I was a science teacher too, and I would have to take the kids into a lab, and there were 25, computers. You bring the kids in, and we would be doing something like volcano and earthquake eruptions in real time and where they were, and we'd plot them so we could get an idea of the plate tectonics and that kind of thing. Ring of fire,
fascinating activity.
Right, and it's great in real time.
Right.
But when you can only get the lab once a week on a Thursday from 1 to 2, doesn't matter that the earthquake happened 2 days before, or whatever the case may be. And so that was sort of very disheartening. So when I came here and the 7th graders had them, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't wait. And I redid it with my current students. The difference was amazing, because before that, it was once a week. Now it was, oh my gosh, look, there's earthquakes happening right now. Right now, in this very instant, there's an earthquake. Oh, look, there's another earthquake. And you could see it all, and they'd plot it. And it was just, the difference was amazing.
And it's not, the arrival of the MLTI was, and again, as we were talking just now, it was that innovation of a first degree. And you've talked about earthquakes and stuff, but it did move the earth.
It did.
In terms of the way school worked, because kids were now empowered with resources in such a different way.
Yeah.
Who encouraged you to take, you obviously came with some hunger, that jealousy, so when they arrived, you were ready to, what kind of encouragement did you get to take advantage of the MLTI?
I got lots of encouragement. Well, our tech director at the time was Trey Bachner, and he would do anything that I asked him for. I need my kids to have email addresses by tomorrow. And, he'd set it up. Anything I asked for, he did. And that was another huge difference. And I didn't have to wait. I think the waiting sometimes is hard. Our internet access was always open. We still don't really close much down. It's very open. And that was a big deal too. We could do pretty much what we wanted. But Trey really was a big supporter of it. The principals and everybody weren't against anything, but there wasn't that same, they were like, oh yeah, this is good, but it wasn't that same encouragement where I found Trey was like, let's do this. And so he was a big proponent and a big reason why I could take it as far as I wanted to go, and I didn't feel like I was ever held back.
So that relationship, that human relationship between you and Trey, who at that point was your technology coordinator, with district-wide responsibilities and authorities, to some degree mirrors, in the classroom, your relationship with your students is what's important as well.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that especially I think science doesn't happen on a I've never taught history, but if you're teaching history, it's happened. You know, and you probably were a history teacher and you taught some history. But in
English
science,
major.
Yeah, oh, okay. In science, everything is happening now. Everything is so current. And to be able to something happens in the morning or overnight, to be able to go in the next day and discover it and really learn more about it and be able to look at even the past of that, whatever it might be. I mean, I'm thinking about now volcanoes and earthquakes are stuck in my head. Climate change,
right.
Great thing. I mean, everything it happens in the moment, and you get to investigate it in the moment. It's not, science doesn't work on a time clock. You can't. It's so continuously evolving and changing, and to have the laptops there with the kids, you could do those investigations immediately.
If we go back to that time, 2002 to 2006, say that first iteration, the first implementation, that was a time also that things like NOAA and others were beginning to grow their delivery of access to their data. Something you took advantage of?
Yeah, I remember. I didn't find it on my own. There was I don't know if she was a professor or a teacher. I was somewhere at some conference, some science learning thing. I can't remember what it is. But we started looking at climate data. And for some reason we were using New Hampshire because that's what we had the most access to. And we actually plotted it, over however many years. And you saw the patterns. So I brought that into the classroom. And then we looked at Maine as far as we could. And the other thing about, the access to the data that's out there was, like, for science is just incredible. I mean, incredible. Even back then.
Right.
I mean, that was a long time ago now when I think about how long ago it was.
Almost 20 years.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And we still had access to so much data. And then to be able to just use it in the classroom. And the other thing that really, really, I think, changed the way I taught is the whole, we always talk about, using it as a tool. Well, it's nice words, but, the difference that I saw was when we were doing something like seeing phase changes, and you have ice, and you've got it on I can't believe I did this on an open flame with the computer sitting there.
Okay.
You'd have ice, and you'd melt the ice and take it all the way through the water boiling, and the kids would record the data on the laptops. And with a press of a button, they could see the plateaus of the phase changes. You could talk about that all until you're blue in the face, but to actually watch the ice melt and see that temperature shot up, and then all of a sudden you're still watching the ice melt, but the temperature's not changing. And to see it graphically like that, and to not have to plot it, because plotting is the death of science. Do you remember? I mean, kids have to learn it, but to actually then...
As a third grade teacher, when I came to be empowered by technology to do graphing, I came to the realization that because graphing in third grade, key skill, but I figured out that I had taught it as an art skill. I had not been doing science with it. It was about accuracy. It was about photorealistic art.
Yeah.
Is what I was teaching, rather than as you described.
Yeah.
And the ability to question. When you're looking over somebody's shoulder at their screen and you see that flat, for you not to say, this is what's happening there.
Yeah, why is that happening? That's the way I always taught science, like that. Wait a minute, what's going on there? Right. Because they would be amazed.
Right.
And then we talk about it later. I wouldn't tell them, because then you compare, like, why is it here and here? Why is it flat here and here? We've got two flat areas, not just the one.
Right. What's going on?
Yeah.
Connect that to the piece. Falmouth Middle School, when you arrived, teams? Were
Yes.
you working in teams? So
Teams.
you were a member of 3 or 4?
4.
Were they houses or referred to as teams?
Eagles and ospreys,
Okay.
teams.
The birds. Go Raptors.
Yeah.
How about the rest of your team? Were you an outlier within your team as far as embracing the technology?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah. Which makes sense as a science teacher. I don't know, it just kind of made sense. But I did have the social studies teacher was on the team. He just retired last year. and he's actually come back as a sub. But when he started, he wanted nothing to do with it. He hated it. About, I don't know, maybe 6 years in, we were at some kind of a thing, crossroads, where we were, it was like, is MLTI going to continue, one of those things. And he said, I would quit tomorrow if they took the laptops away. It was so ingrained with him. And to see somebody who he's quite a bit older than me. He worked a long time. And even then, he had to be, late 50s.
A veteran teacher.
A veteran teacher, been teaching a long time. To see what he did with it, to see that he didn't just, have them sit there and type. I mean, it was, and I had another teacher, same thing, social studies teacher, older social studies teacher, exact same thing. What she would do, I mean, she did current events every single day. She didn't do current events once in a blue moon.
Right.
I mean, they talked about what was going on in the world.
And like you've mentioned with the science data, it could be what happened today.
Yep.
I think of that duration. Did your enthusiasm infect others?
I think so.
Were you apt to share at a team meeting?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Here's what I did, and
yes.
And here's how the kids responded.
Yeah, I did it all the time, and I think that I had to show them what was. I couldn't help it. I wasn't doing it, certainly not to show off, just to say, oh my gosh, this was amazing. And I would just, you talk about it at lunch or whatever.
Because you saw it was amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just from your mind, the teaching, but student response. Can you, without naming names, can you put in your mind a student who for whom access to the technology increased engagement?
Yeah, it's just a little kind of a weird kind of example. That just came to my mind. It was the silliest thing: speech to text.
Yeah.
I mean, the accessibility features, and this is more current, but. A student who struggled. I mean, really struggled. Couldn't write, didn't want to write, didn't want to tell the person they were sitting with their thoughts. Text to speech was like life-changing for this kid. And I had tried to push it for years with specifically this one student, but all other students in that same. And teachers were very resistant. Oh no, they have to learn how to type, or even telling somebody else, how is that anything different than talking? Mm-hmm. It made such a huge difference, and it was just the accessibility features that they could now all of a sudden, instead of having all the angst of the typing and even getting the thoughts from your brain to your fingers. That's a big deal it's a big deal for me. I have trouble with that. When he talked, it was like, boom, that was it. Opened right up.
You've made me think about, and stories that I need to actively search out are those stories of accessibility. Oh. I don't know, and I'll insert this story. Yeah. You are aware that as the MLTI was being proposed and Apple was going to produce and provide the machines, the American Association for the Blind, I believe it was, came forward and said, hold it, foul. This device is supposed to be for everyone, and the accessibility features are not complete. And decisions were made, and I've been told, and this is where I need to ferret this story out, at the highest level within Apple, we're going to do it. So the accessibility features, which came forward at the start of the MLTI and have certainly increased in their capabilities across time, the MLTI sparked that. So what a wonderful story.
I heard that too. Yeah, I've always heard that also.
Yeah, but again, that's when we'll have to go to we'll have to go to a source on that and get the straight scoop. So you see the science work going on. What were the hurdles? You've mentioned your relationship with Trey.
Right.
Were there hurdles? An innovation that comes, an innovation that is so profound as the arrival of the MLTI, the delivery of devices, which for years teachers, there are many of us who have been teachers who perceive our job as moving content. It's all written in this book, and my job is to take it from there and make sure that you know it.
Yeah.
What hurdles? So there had to have been people that in that ground shaking, they dug in heels.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of that, a lot of heel digging. That was a big hurdle. I mean, I think that the middle school teachers are a breed that they will try different things. So yeah. I think the middle school, not just because of the kids, but because of the teachers, I think is why it was such a good place to start. I think had it started at the high school, I don't know that it would have succeeded as well, because middle school teachers are so flexible, because they have to be to deal with middle school students. I think it's just a personality thing. But there was some that still dug in. I have a friend who calls it, there's the pioneers who take off and they're going to go across the country. And then there's the settlers who are just going to stay where they are and they don't want to move. Mm-hmm. They're just going to stay there and they're not going to move. And he always says we have to work with the pioneers, and move people along. And sometimes, we had to really sort of push. I think we had a principal at the middle school who people didn't like for a time period because she made us go to Google. We had to use Gmail and Google Docs, and people were up in arms that they had to do that. And it wound up being really beneficial. I mean, it was, the collaboration, that was the other thing, like even not only in science, for me it was science, but for anything. I would have kids sitting next to each other working on a lab report together, and they're writing the same things, they're using the same data, and yet I've got two separate documents. There was no collaboration. I mean, there was some collaboration, but it wasn't the same as if they were working on the same piece. Mm-hmm. So I tried something early on. Oh, good God, her name is going to... middle school teacher at Mount Arrett Middle School now.
Lisa Hogan?
Lisa had tried something, and I was trying it too, and I can't remember the name of it, but trying to get kids to be actually typing on this, being in the same environment at the same time. I can't remember what it was called.
Yep. Not text edit, but it was a very plain, simple, but it assigned different colors to the authors.
Yeah. And so then when we were able to go to...
Which blew your mind.
Yes.
You remember thinking, how is this possible?
I remember being in teacher meetings and people would be like, oh my gosh, we're all writing on the same... I mean, it was like mind-boggling.
Now Dick Tracy.
But that was a really cool innovation for kids to collaborate and not have to, we took all that data, but now I need it. And to just the monotony of having to do these tasks that were just such a waste of time. Yeah. And to be able to just really collaborate on one document. Oh, did you see that? It was just, I thought that was another amazing thing that really, I think, changed.
Did the MLTI, you teacher in Falmouth?
Yep.
Great district to be a teacher in, well supported, opportunities. Did the MLTI connect you because of the access through the technology? Did you create connections beyond Falmouth? You mentioned working with Lisa.
Yeah, oh gosh, there was so many people. Every time I went to any of the MLTI, the early ones, every time we went to the
content meetings, we called them.
Yeah.
So they brought together science teachers with no specific, here's what you should do. Yes. It was just, so what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. And those, you'd meet people and just, what I loved about that, and even some of the other stuff when we were not just in content before that, when there was other big meetings, you would see what somebody was doing and just be blown away, and you'd want to run back and do it. And it wasn't like the old days where you'd get the packet. Everybody would hand out, everybody had a packet. You could sit there and actually learn. It was more of an immediacy kind of thing. You're doing whatever they're doing right now. You're not waiting.
You had the device. The original MLTI for a significant term was a universal device.
Yeah.
Did that make a difference? That everybody had the same machine?
Oh, but to have everybody on the same device. I remember fighting them going with and it wasn't only from the kids' perspective, it was from the teacher's perspective.
Well, you mentioned going to that meeting and you're looking over somebody's shoulder. You're saying, what are you doing there?
Right. And I can do that.
Right.
It's not like, oh, I can't do that because I'm on this.
Or maybe I can do that, but there's 3 steps that are different and you got to turn around.
Yeah, exactly.
Counterclockwise and...
Yeah. So it made it so much easier that we were all on the same device, the kids were on the same device, and whatever I did, and I tested before I did it with the kids, I knew they had the same device and didn't have to worry about it. I mean, since then, we use iPads at the elementary school. I mean, I had to say, you have to give me an iPad, and you have to give the teachers an iPad.
Sure.
Because originally, that was not the plan. And so what would happen is, and the first year, they didn't have it. So they'd, come up with, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And of course they couldn't do it, but they didn't know, they didn't realize. And of course iPads, it's a little bit different. Yeah. But even, Chromebooks to MacBooks is different. You try it and you think it's going to work and you go, oh, nope, can't do that.
A little different. You've mentioned getting ideas from other teachers. What's an idea? You mentioned the real-time charting of scientific data. What's an idea that somebody picked up from you, that you shared, that somebody else said, wow, how do I do that? And it might be here at the high school. You mentioned the social studies teacher, but people had to look over your shoulder and say, oh my goodness, maybe it was the student you described that was using speech to text.
Right. I think there was probably a lot, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure there was, because there were teachers that would later come. There's so much, it's hard to pick anything out. But when I was at the middle school, there were people constantly asking, how did you do that? What did you do? I can't think of anything off the top of my head, though.
So you recognized as a resource, not only to your kids, but to the teachers. Yeah,
and the reason I went into technology integration is because I had so many interruptions to my class when I was teaching that I'd have open flames. I've got kids with open flames, and the teacher would send the kids to me, why isn't this working?
Just a sec.
Don't burn the place down. I'm going to help this kid. And so it got to be too overwhelming for me to do. I felt like I was doing two full-time jobs, and that's why I went into it, because I would do something, they would try it, and the first time you try something, and depending on your personality, it's how much you're going to persevere and how much, if you know somebody else has already done it, and it's really, and I think teachers, and I don't know if this is, all teachers, but most of the teachers I've met, when they want to do something, they want to do it right now. They don't want to know, oh, well, you could do that next week. They want to do it now, and they want to do it right now, and they don't want to have the issues. That's the only, when you said drawback, that all of us as teachers wanted everything to work perfectly. I think it's a teacher thing. Yeah. And sometimes it wouldn't. And sometimes I'd get frustrated when, even though I had Trey, I cannot imagine other school districts when you didn't have that support. And I wanted to do something, and I'd say, Trey, I'm doing whatever the topic, whatever I was doing, I need to do this 2 days from now or tomorrow. And he'd make it happen. And so many districts. I can't imagine if you didn't have that kind of support. You couldn't do it, and I think teachers would give up. And so that was, to me, one of the most important things, is that I could do it in a timely fashion. I could, and even if he said, oh, I can't do it tomorrow, but I could do it the next day. It was soon. It wasn't like, I never heard a no, you can't do that, unless it was something physically impossible. I never heard a no, you can't do that. And it was always important that it be taken care of. And when I went into integration, I remember I'm a part of the tech team meetings, I remember the first few years when we started, and I was part of the meetings, they would get annoyed that I would answer the phone. Or they would get annoyed when I would say, oh, I got to help so-and-so. Because, like, what do you mean? We're in a meeting. It's like, no, the teacher is having a problem now. I'm going to help them now. Because, if you get interrupted and you've got, 18 kids in the room and then you got 2 that can't do it, it's very distracting and disturbing. You want those kids to. So I would just leave and take care of them. And I remember that was a whole different mindset. But they learned and they realized. I'd say, no, they need to do that now. I can't make them wait.
They learned, and I hear you describing a scenario that strengthens your relationship with them. And if you are part of the tech team, that device to some degree has your face on it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you just described to me what the story you just shared makes so clear. And in the original MLTI, Angus's idea of the one throat to choke, that the device, that you couldn't off the blame for a failure of the program to somebody else. Right. Oh, it's the network's problem. Oh, it's the professional development. They haven't taught you that. Right. That all the pieces were brought together, and it simply needed to work.
Yeah, it had to work. Otherwise, it would have failed. And that's why I'm so glad we went with Apple at the beginning. Had we gone with some other device, it may not have worked because it was so reliable. The hardware itself was so reliable that we didn't, the internet wasn't as reliable back then, but the devices worked.
The devices worked. And thank you so much. Just in closing, we're talking about the original MLTI, huge innovation, and really changed the course of the role of technology, not just in Maine, but literally was the petri dish for the world in terms of ubiquitous access to fully powered devices. Another innovation, which you and I can't predict, will come to education. What advice, looking into the future, would you give, whoever are the teachers, are the principals, are the tech directors, assuming it has a technical bent to it, which it probably will, what advice might you give?
I'd say go for it, number one, and find the people who are going for it and encourage them and make sure that they have no obstacles to what they want to do. I think that's the biggest thing. Make sure there are no obstacles in their way so that they can be successful, so that people will see them being successful. Because if somebody who's very, very excited about something fails and other people see that they failed and they're the one that, well, they really are into this and they're really good at it and they're failing, it's not going to work. So I think in the support from somebody, not just at the state level or the MLTI level, in your district, in your immediate district, to have that support. And I don't know how you work that out, where you make sure that if you're going to try this, you have to be committed to support it in your district.
Yeah. Again, the human network, as important as the digital one.
Yeah.
They all need to work.
Yes, exactly.
Anne, thanks so much. It's been wonderful.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.